Moser Sea Blue with their new Streamliner in enamel, Ulysse Nardin go green with their Freak 1, Bangalore Watch Company's Mac 1 is tickled pink, and Norqain are going for gold with their Wild 1. All this and more on the show today. Welcome to Scottish Watches podcast. We've been on our travels. We've been across the world, across the globe. We have had little sleep all week. We've had little sleep in the last 24 hours, but we're here to record a show today, back in terra firma, back in Scotland, back in Alba, back in that lovely, beautiful place that is now about 3 degrees, which is in stark contrast to the 30 plus degrees that we were experiencing for about 6 or 7 days across in Dubai. But we're back. We're here. We have tons to talk about. We're going to shelve all the Dubai Watch Week chat because we haven't had a chance to go through all the pictures, the video, the recordings, none of that stuff at all. But there have been many new releases since we've been away, so we're going to try and rattle through as many of them as possible. Some from people you've heard of before, some from some new folks, and some from friends of Scottish Watches. You've heard of MB&F, well now we've got SW and F. So Dave, first of all, how is the jet lag? How have you recovered? What have you been up to?
Dave's jet lag's absolutely fine. Dave's biggest problem is he's full of the cold, so if you hear a slightly rough sounding voice, that's because I am literally loaded with the cold. But hopefully my voice will last out this recording. Other than that, yes, as you mentioned, the near 40 degree difference in temperature is somewhat of a shock to the system, it has to be said. It was a little too warm over there. It's definitely a little bit too cold here. I want to do the Goldilocks thing just right. A little bit in the middle would be just right. But hey ho, we are back in the land of haggis and cold weather in the winter. And we may as well go on with it.
We may as well. And the first thing we're going to tell you to do is to take a trip back with us in time to Dubai. I know I just said we were going to talk about Dubai Watch Week, but we are kinda. That was a little bit of a red herring. But we had a guest not so long ago on the show to celebrate 500 episodes of the Scottish Watches podcast. And funnily enough, we've got a watch out to celebrate 500 episodes of the Scottish Watches podcast, but you can find out more about that probably next week because it's not available until St Andrew's Day, so it all ties together. So we'll put a pin in that and we'll talk about probably my favourite discussion, my favourite panel talk at Dubai Watch Week, not just this time around, not just in the last couple of years, but in eternity. And I've gone through the back catalogue because it's all on their YouTube channel, which you should have a look at. And the thing you should specifically look at just now is Stephen McDonald's talk, where I have never heard or seen somebody bare their soul to a live audience in a room and live streaming on YouTube at the same time. It was standing room only. And he went through in more depth than he did in our episode. He went through his life, how he got into watchmaking, and the treacherous way that creating something and releasing it into the world can cause you such mental anguish. And he covered all bases. It was a standing ovation at the end. There were people crying in the room at how good this was. And I don't really say things like this unless I genuinely mean it, and I genuinely mean it this time. Dave, you can give me your thoughts on it, and then we can tell people where to go to find this.
I have to agree with you. You know, the panels were excellent. There was some great panels. There was some okay panels. And then there was this, I guess, lecture would be the best way to describe it, where Stephen really took us through the journey, both factually, emotionally, and scientifically. So he was talking about himself, the reaction to him, both physically and mentally. He talked a bit about the actual science involved and just the whole journey of it. And it was mesmerising, heart-wrenching, and it definitely got your hairs in the back of your neck to stand up, and it got the goosebumps going as well. I've seen many a lecture, whether it be professional or otherwise, and most of them are pretty average, it has to be said. Don't think I've really seen anybody quite bare their soul to this extent in any subject for that matter that I've seen. It was an tour de force. It was an absolutely amazing lecture, irrespective of the fact it was about watches. Just watching another human being expose herself to that level was just something quite different. And whilst it'll be amazing to watch it back on YouTube, it'll just be as good. It won't quite have the same effect as being in the room, mere meters, if not feet away from the individual himself, and just watching it for the first time and watching that emotion. So absolutely, if you didn't see it in real life, go watch it, because it will probably be just as good for you that way. But seeing that in real life is one of the few privileged things I'll get to do in my life for any other human being. It was absolutely amazing.
The funny thing is, I had not signed up for his discussion, because the way things work over there is you have a timetable and there are lots of conflicting things at the same time. Plus, we were doing interviews with brands and people and collectors and watchmakers, and we were trying to get round and see all the booths and all the different product lines that had either come out in the last few months or were specific for this event. And we happened to bump into Stephen as we were leaving one of Barbara Palumbo's talks, and he grabbed us and said, "I hope you're coming along tomorrow, lads." Dave said yes, he was, and I said, "No, I've got other things on the go." And he said, I'd really like to see you there. And I said, "Okay, fine, that's cool. I'll book myself in. I know your story, but I'll book myself in." And I am so thankful that I did do that, because it was incredible. It was a sermon. It reminds me of some of the very, very best talks that Steve Jobs did back in the day. There was one in particular about a university that he was at over in the States. I think he was an honorary member, and he did this talk, and it was phenomenal, and this reminds me of it. So check the show notes. We'll give you a reminder at the end of this show to go and look at it and to go and listen to it, because we want you to stay here just now. But that was probably the best thing of the show, the best thing of any watch event I have been to. Standing ovation, clapping for minutes and past the run time, and the questions and answers section at the end was incredible as well. So that's on YouTube, and this is the only thing I have ever seen, and I went to look on Hodinkey's website in recent times, where you read the article where James Stacey was in the room, didn't see him, but he was there, and he wrote an article imploring people to go and check this out. And in the comment section, not one single person said anything negative, and you never ever see that in Hodinkey, especially not these days. So anyway, speaking of Stephen and what he has done in his life, especially with MB&F and all the crazy creations that he came up with, the heartache that was caused, MB&F had something on the go, and we got to check it out on day one.
MB&F were there. They had launched just at Dubai Watch Week, and I know we said we're not going to touch too much on it, but we really can't avoid this watch because it's been one of the biggest releases of any watch over the last couple of weeks, it has to be said. This is the HM11 Architect. Ethereal, as you would expect from MB&F.
You've said this a couple of times. Do you not mean ethereal?
Ethereal? Two ways of saying the same word. We'll go with that anyway. But anyway.
Okay, cool. On you go, Dave.
Architecture based in terms of the inspiration was these kind of 1950s, 1960s sci-fi-esque pod-like architecture structures that popped up, especially during the 50s, 60s and 70s. It was something that doesn't exist. It was a kind of conceptual idea of one of these pod type livings where you had 4 semi-domes on the side that were kind of interconnected. This watch is just a marvel of engineering. It can rotate, so as you turn it on the actual axis, it's got 4 distinct positions where you can have each of these little driver style watch displays that face you coming forward, and you can click it round at 90-degree intervals. As you turn them, you're winding the watch up as well. There is a crown on one of the 4, but that crown is merely for setting the time. It's not for actually winding the watch up. One of the displays has, as you would expect, the time in it. One of them has power reserve, and probably for the first time, I would say maybe on a mechanical watch, although I'll probably be proven wrong. Certainly this exists on digital watches, but on a mechanical watch, a thermometer. And that thermometer can be configured by the purchaser of the watch, either to have degrees Celsius or degrees Fahrenheit. Really just sculptural, architectural, sci-fi-ish, super cool. And considering what you would think, remarkably wearable. We were lucky enough to get our hands on both colour variations, and it was very wearable on the wrist. It wasn't big, it wasn't cumbersome, and it certainly wasn't heavy, being made of titanium. It has gaskets all over it to ensure that there's at least a minimal amount of water resistance. I absolutely love this watch. It is so MB&F. This is, to me, everything that screams MB&F, but in a much more wearable package than maybe some of the more known MB&Fs are. Ricky, I think you quite like this as well.
Obviously, there's not many MB&Fs of recent times that I don't like. The green one with the white, not even last year, at this year's Geneva Watch Days, that was one that I liked a lot. This one, it's kind of similar. It's different from the sequential and the perpetual calendar that obviously Stephen is most famous for. But this one, the way it was explained and shown to us by the team there, it didn't make sense how it actually functioned. And that is MB&F all over. Because you look at it and you think, How are these parts connected? Do they work? Is this a prop from a movie? And then Arnaud starts to spin things, and this happens and that happens. And I think one of the questions that was raised between me, you, and Simona when we were standing there was, well, how does it pick up the temperature? How does it separate that? Does it not pick up heat from the skin? And he had all the answers the way he explained it, and it was like a bimetallic strip type of idea that you maybe learned about in high school, because we're that old that we probably did. And all the different intricate parts all function together to bring home the design, and the aesthetics and the functionality just marry in perfect synchronicity. And there's a big word for me, having not slept in about 24 hours. But it's just MB&F. It's what they do. It's what they do amazingly well. And yes, there is a price tag associated with this level of ingenuity and watchmaking prowess, but it's worth it if you can afford it. And this is your art. Instead of collecting paintings or sculptures, this is moving art on the wrist.
Yep, absolutely. Even down to the little facts he had, like each time you turn one of the 4 quadrants to face you, it adds 72 minutes, I think, of kind of runtime of it, and 10 complete rotations of the, whatever you want to call it, the watch itself. But 10 complete 360 degree rotations gives you the full runtime of, I think, 92 hours, something of that ilk. So really well thought out, because as you play with it, you're also winding it up as well. Like you mentioned, the temperature on there as well, even down to the details of the time telling, which is just super detailed inside. And he was talking about the kind of ideology and the themes that were taken for designing, even the little balls that were on the watch face that depict the hours and the minutes, which were both different, come from, and I can't remember the name of the designer, but they had all the answers to it, just very well thought out. To be fair, at 200,000 Swiss francs plus tax, of course it should be pretty well thought out, because this is hardly entry-level watches by any stretch of the imagination. 25 pieces of the 2 colours, so 50 in total, will be made available. I think he even mentioned that one of the things they thought about was, if it was to change hands in the secondary market later on and they wanted to change the temperature, that's something that could be done or reconfigured for the new owner as well. So yeah, 42mm in diameter and I think about 23mm tall. So definitely not a stupid size by any stretch, because some MB&Fs, it has to say, are quite big. This one, I just loved it on the wrist. I wish I had the 200 grand plus tax, so probably the better part of 300 grand to buy it, but I don't.
And speaking of MB&F, the Max Booster and Friends part plays into the next watch, and that is from his friend Moser. They've been doing some really good stuff. We have the opportunity to go and see them in a couple of weeks' time. We're barely back in Scotland and we'll be boarding a plane to go across to see a couple of brands actually. There's going to be Moser, Hot Launce and IWC, because they're all around about the same area. And I think that is going to be a good end to the year, going across there and capturing some footage, some pictures, recording some podcasty stuff, and just closing out the year on a high, although this year's been absolutely crazy for the amount of events that we've managed to go to. I thought the big rush after COVID would have kind of died down by now, but there's far more events popping up all the time, lots of opportunities to go and meet people, talk about stuff, see new products, and then bring it to you guys, or disseminating it through the team. Having the writers group, putting stuff on the websites, articles, getting Miziel to post things on the Instagram, which has really shot up in the last little while. That video that we talked about recently, I think we mentioned it was around about 600,000 views, and it has had such a knock-on effect with people joining and following what we're posting. It's put a bit of wind back in Miziel's sales, so that's a good thing. And we should probably move on and talk about this watch then from the folks at Moser, because it's in a colour I love, it's in a material that I love, and it's in a case that you love.
This is the latest iteration of Streamliner to join the ever-growing Streamliner family, the Streamliner Small Seconds Blue Enamel. At first look, very similar to the Green Dragon, or the Centre Seconds Streamliner that I have and many people love. But a little bit of a closer look. Obviously the blue dial's the first giveaway. Then you've got the little sub-seconds on there as well, rather than the centre seconds. Something about it looks familiar, but at the same time, unfamiliar. The dial is the same size, and it is the same size because I checked, as is on the green edition with the centre seconds. But the case is just that little bit smaller, 39mm versus 40mm on the centre seconds. It's also coming in fractionally thinner as well, at around 10mm, so just that slightly tighter package. And how have they done this, may you ask? Flipping the watch over all becomes obvious with their new HMC 500 micro-rotor movement. So this is something they've been working on, and we were lucky enough to see this back at Geneva Watch Days, but we were sworn to secrecy when we were shown it, as it wasn't releasing, obviously, until Dubai Watch Week. But seeing it again really kind of drew it home to me how good looking this watch is. The smaller package really works. That little bit of thinness about it is really going to help and please a lot of people, because a few folk commented the centre seconds is a bit chunky. I disagree, but others do think that. And this new micro-rotor does look extremely nice. I would say they've spent a bit of time developing the aesthetics of this movement as well. Not that the centre rotor model of movement they have is ugly, not by any stretch of the imagination, but this really is a pretty looking movement that's in there as well. Other than that, very similar bracelet that you would expect to see on the Streamliner, that kind of organic defender or armadillo-esque kind of bracelet that goes on there as well. The price, however, has gone up a bit, about 50% more. So this one's coming in just shy of 30,000 Swiss francs, whereas the centre seconds is round about the 20, just over the 20,000 mark now as well. So there is definitely a bit of uplift. No doubt the new movement, the enamel dial, and that platinum rotor will be contributing to the cost of this. But 74 hours of power reserve, very respectable. It's bi-winding as well, so obviously any little bit of movement will help that rotor move, and no matter which way it decides to turn, it will help to wind the watch on there as well. I think it's a great looking package. Obviously with their recent acquisition of Agilor as the movement brand, now part of the kind of bigger group that is part of Moser, they get to swing about and see what happens. And everything I've heard from Edward is that this movement will form the basis of future watches and future complications and modules that get bolted onto it as well. So this is the first kind of outing of probably many that this movement and certainly base movement will make.
I got the opportunity to see this on the booth, get some pictures and include some videos as well. You will not see this in the video on YouTube for this episode because I haven't had a chance yet. Today was spent downloading about a terabyte's worth of information, but it was tremendous to see this. I don't know if it's my favourite Moser because I really like your one, and there are a couple other ones that I really like in the Streamliner range, and that is the one that I love the most, especially the Vanta Black models. And when we were actually at the booth, they had the collection box that we got to see at Geneva Watch Days, where they had all the prototypes and the one-off and the unique pieces sitting there, including the Swiss Icons, which is the amalgamation watch, where they've got the bezel of this, the dial of that, the hands of this. The one that it got a little bit of legal interest from lots of different brands when it was announced as a joke. Within minutes, the team at Moser had a lot of cease and desists apparently, but that's in the past, this is the future. I do remember though, Simona was asking where the grass watch was. I think it was the nature watch, which had grass and moss on it, etc. And she asked one of the gentlemen at the stand, "Where's the grass watch?" And he replied, "Oh, we smoked it." And she didn't quite get that joke, but me and Dave did. But no, it was great to see this release. They can't really do much wrong. The price is going up. That's kind of the market dictates that. We talk about Omega bumping their prices up every couple of months. Rolex do it every year or two. Tudor have done it quite a lot. And even the other brands are starting, the micro brands are starting to push the price up. But how much does food cost? How much does energy cost? All these things have increased. The price of cars has gone through the roof. So naturally, these things would also follow. And you're right, Dave, we did get a sneaky peek of this ahead of time. We actually got into trouble for that because we were told what was happening. We mentioned on the show that people should come to Dubai Watch Week because there's going to be a fantastic release from Moser. And we got our knuckles wrapped for telling people there was going to be a fantastic release from Moser, even though we didn't tell them what it was going to be.
Oops.
Is that all you've got to say for yourself? Oops. Well, the cat is out of the bag. It's a fantastic looking watch. So check the show notes for pictures. Should have said that at the beginning. What are we all about? Check the show notes. There'll be all the pictures, the details, the tech spec, the links, all that good stuff in there. Miziel should hopefully do a very good job. It's been a wee while since we last had him doing stuff because we've been away, but I'm pretty sure he has learned how to spell properly. He's learned how to load the correct show notes in there. All that good stuff, so definitely check that in your podcast player. Click the link, it'll take you to our website, to a specific page dedicated to this episode of the podcast. And I'm trying to think what we should probably talk about next, but again, having said at the beginning, we're not going to talk about Dubai Watch Week, and what I meant was me and Dave are not going to talk about our experiences of Dubai Watch Week, who we saw, what we saw, who we spoke to. There is an article we spotted on Watch Pro when we came back, And it's about a talk that was at Dubai Watch Week between, I think it was Robin Swithenbank was hosting, and they had Mohammed Siddiqui, plus other people, including the chairman of, I believe, or the CEO of Chopard, and another retail establishment. And they were talking about the industry and how things were. And in these things, you never really get the truth because nobody wants to put a foot wrong. They don't want to antagonise the customer. They don't want to piss off the brands. But Mr. Siddiqui was talking about various things, and a question was posed about waiting lists and how does this work and how does that work. And he released some information saying that the waiting lists have dropped by around about 20% on certain models, and we got the impression he perhaps was talking about Rolex, and the figures banded about where, it used to be maybe 10,000 people were on a waiting list for a certain thing, and now it's dropped to maybe 8,000 on a particular model. Now those are sky-high figures, and a lot was made of waiting lists are dropping, interest in watches is dropping, but 20% when you're talking about that volume isn't really that much.
No, absolutely. He was definitely talking about the fact that there's a softening of demand. And I think it's fair to say everyone knows that, because in some countries we've heard it, no doubt folk listening to this have heard it, that certain models, especially Rolex, have come up for availability more quickly than would be anticipated, certainly a couple of years ago. I know a few folk who've said suddenly they get a call out the blue saying that X, Y or Z model was suddenly available. Obviously, many folk also saying they had to pass up on it because either they weren't expecting a call so quickly and didn't have the money, or just with the state of the economy and where things are at, they're just being a bit more judicious with their money. I dare say there's also a few folk who would normally have snapped it up hoping to make a quick buck, realise that that's not quite the case these days and are giving it a pass as well.
Marching through my long COVID memory that had a nice little injection of extra COVID in the last couple of months, that is another talk that is on their YouTube channel, and we will get linked in the show notes, because it was good to hear the conversation flow, and there were some questions that were asked that the audience thought about, me especially. If you put your name down on a waiting list for a particular model and were expecting it, were you going to then pass up the chance of buying other watches? Say, for instance, you had an expectation of being on a list for 1 year or 2 years, etc. Would you have money in a watch fund that would sit there? And perhaps if another model for another brand came up, would you then go and buy that, or would you hold out? Would you keep that money aside? Because I know from personal experience, I just buy what I like. And if I've got my name down for a watch and that watch comes in, if I have the money available at that moment in time, I will make a decision. Or more often than not, I'll phone Dave and I'll get him to make the decision so I can blame him later. And that works out a treat. He was talking about Rolex models. He was talking specifically about high-end pieces that definitely still have a massive waiting list. Blue-dialed Sky Dwellers, Daytonas, etc. Some of the subs are easier to come by. Some of the GMTs, certainly not the case. The Pepsis, there's even a rumour going around just now that Rolex are going to stop making the Pepsi because it's so difficult to make the coloured bezels. Could be true, might not be. But it was another interesting talk, and having the different gentlemen from different brands, as I say, from Chopard and this luxury retail company talking about how releases work. There was some information talked about where brands specifically would hold back on luxury items, and we're not just talking watches, we're talking across the board, to generate interest and hype when the products are sitting there, but they're making it difficult for consumers to get to, so they feel as if they've earned it. And another great thing was, if everybody could attain and get hold of certain things, nobody would want them. And again, that is just the human condition.
There is definitely some brands where the availability or lack of is down to production. They just can't make that many. Brands like MB&F, like Moser, like many of the other brands that we are going to be talking about over the coming shows that we saw over at Dubai Watch Week, where, simply put, there's one or two people making tiny numbers of very advanced and technical watches with lots of finishing. They only make a handful of watches a year. If there's more than a handful of people want them, you're going to have to wait. There's other brands that absolutely have stock sitting, and they bleed it slowly into the marketplace in order to control the supply and demand and create this artificial level of demand or perceived demand for it as well. I know which one I like to align myself with and which one I'm definitely not so keen on, but that is just the way markets work.
Manufactured scarcity. Yes, it is common across the world, especially in cars, as we've spoken about before. But something we should probably speak about is the listener feedback that we've had. We've had a few questions, we've had a few comments, and Dave, do you want to hit us with the first one in?
So hi Ricky and Dave, I'm circa a year into my time travel odyssey of the podcast back catalogue, and I'm up to episode 258. Within one of those earlier episodes, I can't remember which, hence my question, I'm sure Ricky will remember, in passing a guy business that refurbishes vintage watch bracelets. Have I imagined that? Or if not, can Ricky tell me what that was? Reason being, I have a vintage Omega Flightmaster with a very flexible stretch bracelet that I would love to have tidied up. Any guidance recommendations would be highly appreciated. Regarding yesterday's episode 515, Dubai Watch Week sounds great. Next year I'm planning on going to Geneva Watches and Wonders for one of the normal weekend days, which I'm really looking forward to. But the hands-on nature of Dubai you talked about sounds way better. Definitely one for the future. Cheers guys, Mark Jones. So your COVID memory, Ricky, I'm going to guess you've no idea unless you're going to surprise me by having had a look through and getting the information.
No, I haven't done that because I can remember, and it was through the Rolex forum that I learned of this guy, and I don't know if he still does it, but his name was Michael, and he then founded the Undone Watch Company. He was known as the magician of bracelets. He would take something that was absolutely buggered and would bring it back to pristine condition. Don't know how he managed it. Don't know what trickery was involved. So if you go onto the Rolex forum website and do a search for vintage Rolex bracelet refurbishment, I'm inventing words, Dave. You should be proud of me. I might actually get Miziel to do some research and go and find the link to that kind of thing and put it in the show notes, so check the show notes on that one. And while you're having a look in the show notes, also have a look for a picture of a certain ex-James Bond wearing a very Secret Service watch that people shouldn't actually know about. But Dave, you know about this, don't you?
What can I say? I can say that I probably know more than the average individual in this, and this was a watch that Mr. Daniel Craig was seen wearing at a Omega event in New York, where they had lots of their ambassadors and fans along for this big showcase event. Daniel Craig was seen wearing what very much initially looked to be the white gold or the Canopus gold Speedmaster, but then a few people started saying, wait a minute, it's got some red writing on the dial. It's a very white looking dial, and it also doesn't look like the finishing that's on the Canopus gold. And rightly enough, this definitely looks like a Commoner Garden steel new generation Speedmaster, but with a pretty bright white dial with a line in red. I think it's the Speedmaster in red. And there's a lot of people debating, are they about to release a Commoner Garden regular steel Speedmaster with a white dial? Which would be something that would be, I would suggest, much in demand, as they've done very few watches in the Speedmaster range that have a proper white dial. There's obviously the Alaska project. There's also the second generation of the Snoopy, which had the white dial on there as well, and very few others. There was a Japanese special issue for a retailer, and outside of that, that's it. So introducing a proper white dial as a regular Speedy, I think would go down very well. And all I'm going to say is you should closely watch this space over the next coming 6 to 8 weeks, and I think you'll find your dreams come true.
Well, there we have it, straight from the horse's mouth. I'm calling you a horse, Dave. Maybe you're not hung like one, but you look like one.
Well, I don't know. You don't get me into that refrigeration and I might be frozen and stiff as well.
It was a cool picture. We saw it again. Check the show notes. We'll put that in there. And a lot has been happening while we've been away. I thought there'll be a drought. We'll come back and we'll really be scratching away trying to find something under the surface. But no, there's absolutely loads and loads to chat about. And the next thing we're going to talk about is yet another watch we got to see in Dubai. Yeah, okay. I'm going to maybe go back and edit the start of the show and take out the bit that says we're not really going to talk about this too much, because once again, we walked in day one for a presentation from Ulysse Nardin, and it was on their Freak 1, and it was in a very military-inspired colour scheme. We have followed the trajectory of the Freak for a number of years. It's been going for 20 plus years, and we got to experience every single model this year. Watches and Wonders, there was a big splash. The presentation showcased the initial prototypes, the first editions, right the way through to the Freak X. And then Geneva Watch Days, a similar thing. We got to see their silicon blue marquetry editions of various different models, including the Blast that Freak was there to look at. And then this time around, we got a really crazy presentation in the booth with not only the guy that runs the show, the guy that designs the watches, but the gentleman who invented and created the first ever Freak. He was there as well. So it was a fantastic event to go to. And as Mark rightly said, versus Geneva Watch Days, versus Watches and Wonders, Dubai Watch Week is so hands-on, you get to see so much stuff, and that is as a normal person. It's not a media, it's not press, it's not a retailer, it is everybody and anybody. So that was a great little presentation. I got to spend a little bit of time with one of the gentlemen behind Ulysse Nardin later on at Dubai Watch Week, and he was explaining the history of the brand, how it's changed recently, how there's been that management buyout, and how they're taking things forward. And this is a good step in the right direction because I'm not a green watch person. I've become more so in the last couple of months, but this one, it tickled my fancy. How about you?
Absolutely. And what's this watch we're talking about? It is the Ulysse Nardin Freak 1 Ops. And it's really a derivation or an iteration of a model that was released earlier this year, that being the Freak 1, which we saw back at Watches and Wonders, and we saw it at Geneva Watch Days. Very much stealthy, the original one, the kind of darkened titanium case on there. Just a great looking watch. I think both of us agreed that we really liked it. But with this one, the Ops is short for operations. They've given it very much a military vibe, camouflage type greens going on in there, and just a kind of military aesthetic to it. Everything about this military aesthetic is great. It's a great looking watch. There's one little flaw that I'll come to towards the end of telling you about this watch that maybe isn't quite very much military ops, but we'll get there. Anyway, these kind of olive greens on there. You've also got the carbonium, which is their proprietary kind of carbon style material that's used for the bezel. This is a material where 2/3 of recycled carbon fibre from the aerospace industry mixed with 1/3 of a very strong epoxy creates this super tough kind of carbon epoxy type material. Very friendly, shall we say, to the environment. Friendly is probably the wrong word, but friendlier than could be because it's using parts that would otherwise probably end up in landfill. So really nice from that perspective. The one flaw, and a big flaw when it comes to a military-inspired ops watch, is the water resistance is 30 metres. So that's not exactly going to survive anything military-wise other than maybe marching around in a nice clean uniform in the parade ground. Outside of that though, great looking watch, everything you would expect from the Freak. No crown on there, everything's kind of adjusted via the bezel. I love the Freak, it's such a cool looking watch. Pricey, but not at the same time, in and around the 63,000 Swiss francs, which is about 68,000 euros. That includes taxes for a change, so it's not quite as painful as it could be. It's a lot of money, for sure, but for me, it doesn't strike me as a huge amount of money for what you're getting here. If this came out of any of the more niche independents, a la MB&F, for example, me feels it might be a lot more money than this. So yeah, all in all, great package. Just don't get it too near water.
I'm going to ask a question myself. Is it my favourite UN? No. Is it my favourite colour scheme? No. Would I want it if someone offered it to me for a loan, short term or long term? Definitely yes. I loved their blue Blast that came out just a few months back and we got to check it out in real life, and that is the key factor with these watches. When you're spending such a high amount of cash, checking it out, getting to play with it, seeing how it fits on the wrist, because it's like buying the wrong car. You wouldn't get a car without test driving it if it cost a significant amount of cash, and it's the same with these types of watches. But the Freak has always interested me as much as I've had a loan of the Blast in the past. I think they're on to a winner, and I think this whole management buyout thing between them and Girard-Perregaux, it's working in their favour. They were already doing good things, we're getting press, we're getting coverage, we're getting watches on wrists, but things have just moved on. They've actually accelerated forward, and this one, along with the other ones that have come out this year, I think they're doing great things and they're going to be winning awards left, right and centre, because that was something that did happen. They're so proud of the fact they've had the recognition of recent times at GPHG for winning one of the awards for being one of the most iconic watches in the world, and it was like this pat on the back that had been 20 years in the making. So great things here and great things to come from those guys.
Yep, absolutely agree. I think everything that both Ulysse Nardin and Girard-Perregaux are doing, very much both sing to me. Obviously, I'm definitely more in the Girard-Perregaux camp, but again, like you, if someone was to come along and say, would you like a long-term loan of this freak, I would take their fingers off getting the watch out of their hands, because it is a really, really cool product.
But it's that time of the show where we forget at the beginning to tell you to check the show notes. We also forget to tell you that if you're watching this on YouTube, we'd appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel, you gave us a like on this video, and you left a comment telling us what you liked, what you disliked, what you'd like to see more of, and what you'd like to see less of. But one thing we always forget is the wrist checks, and they seem to go further and further down the show. And Dave likes to come second. I obviously have to come first, and I'm going to tell you what I've got on the wrist because it leads into what Dave's going to tell you in a little bit of time. And because of that, he's going to go first actually and tell us what he's got on the wrist, so I can lead into the next part of the show.
I truly dislike you for this, because at the end of the day, logic got the better of me on this one, because you're right, it will lead on to what we're going to talk about, hence you should go second, even though I like coming second. Oh, I don't like this, but anyway, I am wearing, or should I say was wearing, my Bulgari.
You sound like Johnny 2 times at a Goodfellas.
Outrageous. Back to this. I saw this again at the Bulgari booth at Dubai Watch Week, and I thought to myself, yeah, I need to have that because I haven't been wearing it for a long time. This is the aluminium case, as can be seen here, with the rubber strap articulated in many ways, with the little aluminium kind of nubs in between that helps it to articulate, as can be seen. The rubber bezel on here with Bulgari going around it, so we're a bit repetitive again. The kind of white or off-white cream dial, chronograph. It's an ETA movement in here, so nothing super fancy and in-house on there, but nice, slim, lightweight, really wearable, really nice kind of little tang buckle on there as well with the logo, which kind of matches nicely in with the design language to fit onto the bracelet. Just a great looking watch, and these come in round about the £2,500 mark, so not inexpensive by any stretch, but certainly for something from the Bulgari catalogue, I would suggest it is very good value.
But my wrist check, finally getting to it, is a watch that you have seen and heard of many times before. And there's a number of reasons that I'm talking about and wearing this watch today, because it was 2 years ago, just before Dubai Watch Week 2021, that I finally got my order fulfilled from the guys at Horage, and I'd been waiting patiently for a number of years, I think from early 2020, before the pandemic, when the folks there, that was Andy and Landon, came across to Scotland in January 2020 to talk to us about the brand, the history, the heritage, the models they had out, and a new project they were working on, where they were going to bring a tourbillon in a Swiss-made watch to the wrists of people at an attainable price. That finally arrived just before Dubai Watch Week. Famously, I stole, or was gifted, the movement from Landon's prototype watch, and it went inside a case of my own, a handset of my own, and the actual strap that was mine. I quickly changed out the strap from the leather number to, if you're watching the YouTube video or you're looking at the show notes, a rather impressive eBay Tropic Blue strap that works very well. But the reason I'm wearing this Horage Tourbillon 1 today is because you can't get it. It has been out of production for a long time. There were a few that kind of sneaked out last year when the spare parts bins were raided, and there were quite a few number of components left over. They managed to concoct a number of watches for some very lucky purchasers, but there has been some talk in the shadows of a new tourbillon, not a tourbillon 1, but one that is similar, but instead of being manual wind and all the rest of that, incorporating some new things that Horage have been working on, and that is the micro-rotor from their K2 movement and bringing it into this watch. So what I'm showing here is that kind of waffle arrangement, skeletonized 120-hour 5-day power reserve tourbillon 1 with the original movement. So that's what I'm wearing today. And Dave, what is the reason I'm wearing this today?
Horage have announced a new model. Now, it's very much related to what you have there. The Tourbillon 1 was the first tourbillon that Horage did. They obviously then followed that up a couple of years later with the Tourbillon 2, which was very much a classier, dressier variant, shall we say, of the Tourbillon 1, which has got that kind of sporty vibe to it. So you've got a more traditional either Grand Fou or blue femto laser dial in the Tourbillon 2. But they also, in the meantime, released a new automatic movement, the K2 micro-rotor, and they've taken everything they've learned from that K2 micro-rotor and the hand-wind tourbillon movement and put them together to come up with the tourbillon micro-rotor, the KTMR movement, which has been announced alongside the watch that will first feature that movement, which is the Autark tourbillon. Now, You, Ricky, will remember back in the day when we first met Andy and Landon from Horage, they showed us the Autark, and I think one that we both agreed that we had some degree of love for was the Autark 10th anniversary model, which was a limited edition piece of 100 that they did to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the brand. The Autark case has been used as the basis for this new Autark tourbillon watch, coming in at 39mm and a mere 8.8mm thick. So super compact, grade 5 titanium, but it also features their new bracelet, a bracelet that first saw the light of day on the Superseed GMT that has their in-house proprietary micro adjust clasp. But this, unlike on the Superseed, which is in stainless steel, this bracelet again is done in grade 5 titanium. Dial wise, we're going to have a few different options. There's a kind of grey Fumi, which features a power reserve. There's also an additional blue sunray without power reserve and a black sunray dial, again without power reserve. But this is a much sportier integrated bracelet. Great looking watch in my opinion. I know I'm biased, I work for the guys, hands up, not going to say it, but I think for me, again, this is just a really good looking watch. Got a little bit of a vibe of a few different things out there whilst being quite different. It's probably fair to say, Ricky, you're a bit less biased than I am on this one, so what's your take on it?
Full disclosure, as you mentioned there, and we say this all the time when we talk about Horage, we met them for the first time back in January 2020, and I'd been speaking to them since probably, late to mid to late 2019. We'd obviously got a watch through from them that I despised, other people liked. Then they got in touch with me to say, look, we do a whole range, we'll send you something else, see what you like from the range. They sent across their Meteor dial one with black onyx that I really liked. They had the Autark, they had the Array. And I thought, they've got a whole load of different things, but the fun begins under the dial. That was always the problem for me with Horage products. The architecture was great, the K1 movement was great, what they were thinking of with the tourbillon was great, and then this came out, the design for this came out, and we actually had the female designer on the show, Marcella, and she explained how she came up with the thought process and all the rest of it. And since then, the designs have worked for me. Lensman 1 and 2, different things have brought out, I have actually really appreciated. Now, then I caught myself in a problem, because when we came across to hear the presentation that obviously Dave, you were involved in, that I had no pre-warning about, I got to see certain things that are coming down the line. And again, some of them I hated and some of them I really liked. And this one that you're talking about just now, when I was looking at it, I thought, would I switch? Would I switch from what I have to what is coming out? And I think my decision is, no, I wouldn't, because I like the crazy. I like the Mad 1. I like the Omega Speedmaster Apollo 8 because it's got that cutout, it's got the laser ablation to it. I love the Snoopy, the new one that came out, because it's got the cool funkiness in the back with the animation. And this is my favourite Horage still. But since this isn't available, and if I had the opportunity to, and if I could get one as a long-term test, nudge nudge wink wink, then definitely I would check out this new one. So anybody who's interested, I would definitely recommend check the show notes. There will be a link there. Go across to the website, because I believe the price on this one, if people get in on the ground floor, is ridiculously cheap, as it was with the Tourbillon one.
The retail price of this watch is going to be 14,990 Swiss francs, including taxes, etc.
And we'll stop you there and we'll say that is for an in-house made, designed, produced Tourbillon in low volume numbers from an independent who creates movements for some of the biggest names in the world, which has been announced, obviously, Bremont, but there are other people, we can't let the cat out of the bag on that, and this comes with a micro-rotor movement. So let that sink in for that price when we've just talked about MB&F and Moser.
Absolutely. But then, to compound that even more and to show what great value it is, as it's a long-form project and these watches are due to be delivered towards the end of 2024, so give or take a year from now, anyone getting in early to this kind of project can buy one for 9,990 Swiss francs, which is an outstanding value package for what you're getting here. Ricky just said it was outstanding at 15,000, so just think what it's like for under 10. Each week, the watch will go up in price by 100 Swiss francs. Every Tuesday, on the dot, it goes up by 100 until it reaches the final retail price. So the earlier you get in, the better value it is. That said, even if you buy it at retail, in my humble opinion, it is still extremely good value for money. But if you want in early, the earlier you come in, the more money you will save on the final retail price. We also have another little item from a watch brand that we've been, I guess, talking quite regularly about on the podcast, and one that you might not hear so much about anywhere else, that being a Bangalore watch company, who have a very nice looking model from their Mach 1 range called the Silk Scarf.
I've had a look in person of this model, not this colourway, but this model, because it was almost a year ago that we recorded a show with Nirapesh and, funnily enough, Nick from Fears, because it was Nick that put us in touch with Nirapesh, and we got to explore the Bangalore Watch Company on the podcast here. It was good to find a brand from a country we didn't know anything about, and historically, as Nirapesh said, luxury watches is not something that India is known for. They're more known for Mumbai specials, as they're called on eBay, and this was a conversation that he had and explained all about. But he was bringing luxury watchmaking to India, and the releases that he did bring out, a little bit like when we talk about certain products from, say, for instance, China, and people have a negative idea in their mind about quality control. But we remind them, hold on a minute, I mean, look at your DJI products, look at your Apple products, your Samsung products, various ones. If the money is put in, then you get a quality product out the other end. But if you want to pay cheap prices, you will get a cheap result. With the Bangalore Watch Company, it is high quality. And we did mention there that this has been the episode of Scottish Watches and Friends, because we've already spoken about people we know within the industry. We've talked about Horage, who were people that was a brand that I didn't care much for, started to grow to like, started to love, and then they actually came across and offered Dave a job.
Yep, absolutely. So, as we mentioned, the Bangalore Watch Company started back in 2018 by Nirapesh and his wife Mercy, and they really are trying to use anything that India's done in a big way, whether that's aviation, cricket, sport, and their space program as a theme, certainly for the Mach 1 aviation-inspired range of watches. Now, this one is something a little bit different. It's called the Silk Scarf. Silk Scarf and aviation, you say? Where's the connection? This is really to celebrate the role of women within Indian aviation. And a little fact that many people won't know is that the percentage of women pilots to male pilots within aviation in India is the highest in the world. India has a very big aviation sector, and they have a significant number of female commercial pilots as well flying for them. Back in the day, the tradition was that the pilots, especially women pilots, would wear a bit of a neckerchief, and this is the idea behind this. Really not about anything specific. In the past, some of their watches have been about a specific aircraft carrier or a specific aircraft or a specific individual. This is more generally celebrating the role of women in aviation in India, and you've got this kind of silk scarf effect with this pink hue to it. Lovely engraving on the case back that shows this kind of neckerchief tie as well. I think it's just a really nice nod and a really nice thing to cover and something to be proud of. You know, having a higher percentage of women pilots in commercial aviation than any other country in the world is something that most of the other countries should certainly be aspiring to. This goes back to a 21-year-old Indian pilot who became India's first commercial pilot back in 1936. And then following the 1980s, when the kind of economy began to open up, you began to get huge numbers of women moving into aviation. 40mm stainless steel case, as you would expect from the Mach 1, we've talked about before, coming in at just under 11mm thick with a water resistance of 100 metres. Sellita SW200-1 automatic movement in there, 30 hours power reserve, as you would expect from a Sellita, and coming in at just a touch over $1,000 at 1,050. Amazing value package as well for the money, it has to be said. Great looking watch, and all of the Mach 1s we've seen so far are all watches that certainly I would wear, and I pretty much believe Ricky would wear if he had one to put on his wrist.
And I have had one to put on my wrist because I got a selection box through last Christmas from Nirapesh and Co. And I was very taken with the quality. There was a cricket watch in there as well that we discussed on the show. And as much as people tell me ahead of time, our products are really good, I like to see them, I like to wear them, and not just for a couple of hours. I like to see how the strap wears, how it breaks in. I like to see how the light plays with it. If I'm in the car, if I'm outdoors, if I'm inside. There are all these different things that you don't get the opportunity to experience if you're going into a boutique and you sit down for 10 minutes or 20 minutes. There is more to it than that. And I was genuinely impressed with the production, the quality, and something I obviously talk about in the show is the presentation when you buy it. What is the experience like? In the box it came in was this gloss piano black number with embossed writing on it. All very well put together and impressive. So this one here, I think it will do very well. It's a bit of a niche colour for what you're looking at here watch-wise, but it's a great addition to the range, and a great addition to the range from the folks over at Norqain, other friends of Scottish Watches. They have got, well actually they've got something that is sitting in storage because it arrived while me and Dave were away, and that is another selection box ahead of Christmas of some of their most recent releases. It doesn't have the watch we're about to talk about just now, but it does have a selection of turquoise numbers, and let me think, chronograph numbers, and also I believe it's the marathon watch that I really liked from last year, which is white and black. So I'm looking forward to kind of unboxing that in a way on a future show, perhaps the next one that me and Dave do in a week's time. And the ones we're going to talk about just now from Norqain are variations of the Wild One in gold. And Dave, you can take this one because I'm going to go nuts in the next episode about the selection box I've got in storage.
Again, we're not meant to be talking about Dubai, but two models that they released at Dubai are the Wild One Gold and the murdered out Wild One All Black. The gold is their first precious metal, so this is the first precious metal watch in the Norqain range, and it comes with an 18 karat red gold case mixed with the, what's the proprietary Norqain stuff called?
Norqainite.
Not Norqainite. Norqainite.
Made of Norks.
So the Wild One Gold is the first precious metal model from Norqain. You have 18 karat red gold mixed with Nortec, their proprietary kind of composite material. It's a really good looking watch in my opinion, if you like that whole red gold vibe going on about it as well. We've talked about the Wild One a lot on previous episodes. It's the sportier model within the range, lightweight. Obviously this precious metal is going to add a considerable amount of heft to it, no doubt about that, but I think they've done it in quite a tasteful manner, using enough of it to really give the effect and to give the look of a precious metal watch, but not enough that the price goes stratospheric. And by that, we're talking 11,950 Swiss francs for the Wild One Gold with a regular black buckle, or 13,590 if you also wish it with a red gold buckle as well. So for a precious metal watch, there's few companies who are able to offer that type of product for this amount of money, albeit using quite a lot of the Nortec material to reduce the gold content. But the murdered out all black version, exactly as you'd expect, more traditional along the lines of the Wild One, lots of that Nortec material, but pretty much everything done in black, coming in at 4,950 Swiss francs on that one, much more in line with the Wild One range. If you like that full dark murdered out look, this is going to be the one for you. Legibility probably isn't going to be great. None of the watches of this ilk really are, even if they've got luminate. If it's been darkened over, it doesn't tend to last too long. But if you like that stealthy vibe, then this is probably the one for you.
I'm having trouble here. I'm supposed to be buying a house next year, and the gold one is singing to me, Dave.
I suggest you don't make this known to a certain individual, or else you might lose appendages.
So I am going to have to be very, very careful with the credit card, because that one is singing to me. And a watch has not sung to me for a while. It's been a while since I've purchased something. Although there was a new watch alert that me and Dave were involved in, but we'll get to that in a future show.
Absolutely. So I think that might well round out this show, where we were not meant to talk too much about Dubai Watch Week, but found ourselves pretty much talking about... Oh, my camera's just gone off.
Well, it turns out Dave is hot stuff.
Who knew it? Apparently my temperature on my camera overheated. Must be looking at this bonny bonce.
Very glad we didn't take your camera to Dubai.
It's never done it before, which is somewhat unusual, and considering it's got a fan blowing it, I think it might have had a little hiccup to itself. It's tired, it's got a bit of jet lag, and it's got a bit of the cold, the same as its owner. Hey ho, we need to move on. We weren't meant to talk too much about Dubai Watch Week, but we found ourselves talking about Dubai Watch Week, but lots more on that subject to come, a bit more in depth, a bit more what we got up to. So you need to tune in the forthcoming weeks to see that. Anything else you'd like to say in the trail out, Ricky?
No, because we're running long. I have a lot of editing to do. Miziel is getting on the case with this, and this show is getting recorded and finished around about 9:30 on a Wednesday night in the UK. It needs to be out for 6 a.m. the following morning. It's going to be a long night ahead. So that is us. If you want to get in touch, don't DM us, drop us an email, info@scottishwatches.co.uk. Follow us on Instagram, we'd love that, @ScottishWatches. Be sure to check out the YouTube channel, that's where the episodes of the podcast are appearing, and we have got Gav working on the videos in the background, so the stuff that's in the back catalogue, for instance, we had Hind Siddiqui and Barbara Plumbone talking about Dubai Watch Week. That was his first edit, he did a great job, and he's been catching up. He's got the Norqain episode done, he's got the limited edition one done, so the YouTube channel is going to slowly fill up with the back catalogue that we've not had the chance to edit ourselves, so go and check that out. And that's pretty much it. So thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys again soon.